Welcome to the Growth Ventures podcast, the go-to platform for entrepreneurs, innovators, and changemakers. I'm your host, Hamlet Azarian. In this podcast, we delve into the world of business, technology, and innovation. We bring you conversations with industry leaders, disruptors, and visionaries who are shaping the future and making a difference. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a curious listener, join us on the journey of learning and growth. Welcome to the Growth Ventures podcast. And now, let's delve into today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Growth Ventures podcast, where we delve into the world of business, technology, and innovation. I'm your host, Hamlet Azarian. Today, we're joined by Robin Sodaro, a visionary leader, brand builder, and creative strategist. With a rich background in marketing and creative strategy, Robin has worked with renowned companies like Ampersand, GroupM, Wavemaker, and Maxus Global. In this episode, we'll explore Robin's journey into a creative strategy and marketing industry, her strategies for building successful campaigns, the role of technology and data in marketing, and her insights on the future of the industry. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation. Robin, I'm so excited to have you on today. I know you're one of those people where I've come across in my journey, in my personal journey, that has had a real impact on me. I remember from the first meeting we had in the COVID era, where we met obviously at Disco and we connected. It's just every conversation I've had with you, it's been such a joy, because I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I'm glad to be able to invite you to the podcast so everyone else can see and feel and hear all the great insights that you have that I've been fortunate enough to have throughout our many conversations. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and to share that with you. And those are really nice words, especially when you say about COVID. I think I would have never met you had it not been for that. So for all the things that we like to dwell on that's a negative, there are some great positives, and to be able to connect to people that I probably normally would not have. So all good there.
So in our podcast, Robin, what we like to do is we like to kind of delve into the journey of our careers or our past and how that's helped shape us and form us who we are. So we typically like to start in the past, and then from there, we'll transition into the current moment. And then from that point on, we'll go sort of into the future. And I'm not talking about like years in the future. I'm talking about what you see in the next 3 months or 6 months. So one of the first questions I really would love to get into is, how did you get into what you do, like creative strategy? And like, can you elaborate a little bit there and kind of tell me early on in your career, did you know this is what you want to do and this is the path you chose? Or how did you discover, I guess, your journey?
It's funny. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I started in publishing and magazines as a child. I had a fixation on magazines, and in my creative space, I used to be a collagist. So you take certain elements from each thing. You take some copy, you take a few things, and you merge them together. So publishing and design and magazines made a lot of sense to me, because I could take words and visuals and put them all together to tell a story. And I really enjoyed that very much. I loved to read the articles and the stories and then figure out what the visual was around that. And then that was my training for the most part. And then I got into marketing in publishing to start marketing the business itself and some of the things that were offered. I worked in medical publishing, so not the sexiest, but it certainly was great on the education front. And something about the medicine itself was very fascinating to me, because it was science-based. In any event, I got into the marketing part and really enjoyed it. And at that point, wasn't really in branding so much as I was just working on how we could get clients, how we were exposing our clients to our material, basic marketing initiatives. And then I can't even remember where we were redesigning the magazine. And then I started to realize that redesigning a magazine was indeed building the brand, right? There was always a brand, no matter what it was. At the time, it was Tennis Magazine, which was easy in a sense, because it was focused for one thing. So I wasn't thinking about, we definitely were thinking internationally and worldwide, but not necessarily, it was one industry. So it was kind of easy for us to focus, and there wasn't a lot of competition. So it was interesting how I started to really play into the brand aspect of it and realize that was a persona and a personality. And when I started to get further into that, I then started to look for positions where I was able to bring that brand awareness to whomever it was that was digesting that. So I stayed in marketing. So I've been in marketing and media for the majority of my career. Recently,
traditionally you started in print media, sounds like, and then
print and then to digital.
Print to digital. When that transformation happened to you, what was there like a moment you're like, wow, how did that occur? I guess how did you?
Well, I'm going to really date myself, Hamlet, because now you're making me do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I used to work on boards. There were cars then, so don't worry, it's not horse and buggy days. But I used to work on boards and lay out magazines on boards. I had training from college. I was on computers, but there were still a lot of companies that were not doing it that way. My first job was with a design agency, and we were on a computer, but then I actually went back to boards. And for me, going from a computer to a board was, it was antiquated already, right? And even though lots of companies were there. And I remember then being the innovator and the maverick, and I was going to show everybody how this was going to be, so much different. At the time, it was Quark. There wasn't an Adobe suite. So this particular company I was working for was going to develop their own program that was specifically for them to do laying out of their magazines. And it was tough. It was a rough one because there had already been something out there that was working beautifully. But over the coming months, and I think they started to see what was happening, that we were then, it was preventing us from hitting our deadlines. And in the magazine world, you're always 3 months ahead to begin with. So it was those print dates were coming fast and furious, and there was more material, and the efficiency was tremendously different. And that was it. And there was
collaboration as well too, right? Being able to share files, that hadn't come around, I guess, until late.
I think initially we always had servers because they were obviously collecting data. It wasn't that far back. We were still getting, all of this one big company to get everything. But we had servers like these IBM servers that you would walk in a room and it was 150 degrees because there were these giant machines there that were your servers, right? You could physically see these servers where everything was going. And yes, we worked a long time to get everything turned over. And, now we're in cloud world, so we're not really dealing with all that as much. But these are things that I think were presented to me, and it was just you adapted quickly and you didn't really think too much about the technology, as crazy as that sounds, because it's all, if you're not saying a sentence about technology.
It's not really the skills that you're developing as a marketer or as a brand strategist.
Right.
So where did you, I guess where I'm getting at is, the tools themselves are just a byproduct of what you have and what you can use. But as your career started evolving, as your career started developing, where did you really realize, man, I'm really good at this. I really enjoy doing this. I really enjoy building creative strategy, and I really want to start working with bigger teams and bigger projects. When did that start occurring for you?
So funny enough, it probably was always in the forefront, or even maybe in the back of my mind a little bit, maybe not really able to put exactly what it was that was fueling me at that time until I came back. I took a hiatus for a few years, take care of my kids. They were small at the time. And when I came back into the workforce, I worked for Maxus, and it was a media agency. And they asked me to come strictly to start working on their brand, and they wanted to rebrand at the time. And that's when it really connected, because I wasn't brought in as a creative strategist. I was brought in as a creative director, and I was there to really build the brand identity, the visualization of the brand identity. But it was those war rooms where we sat and we developed, and I worked with a creative strategist who at the time, I don't think I even was familiar with what a creative strategist really did, what the difference. I mean, they did cross, but and all the marketing experts and the salespeople, and that collaborative feeling of we have something to solve. I was in new business first, which was also great. New business reminds me of startups, right? It's the same type of, everybody's on deck. You're working these crazy hours. You don't even know day from night, and all to, hopefully get this new client. And there was something really exciting in building that strategy. And even, wins and losses, either way, you were still part of something I felt that was always moving forward and innovative.
So for our audience, they might not know the differentiation between a creative director and a creative strategist. Can you elaborate?
You're going to ask me, you're going to ask me that. And I was like, please don't ask me that, because I don't think I'm going to give you the best answer on that. I feel as though a creative strategist is also thinking about how the strategies are applying to the messaging and to the vision and to ultimately how this is going to bring profit to the company in in a holistic way. Whereas the creative director is really strictly looking at the creative content, really looking at, and now we've changed because content means a whole different thing. But at the time when I was there, I was strictly doing the visualization of the brand. So if we were adhering to certain colors, if we were laying out a certain way, if our look and feel had, whatever we were applying to that, that was my job as a creative director then, and then to explore those options on how we could push that further throughout. I think the strategy part for me just started to happen. I don't want to say accidentally, but it almost did, where I was working with marketing directors and leaders that we would challenge one another into how does this look overall? And how is this touch point hit and affect every aspect of the company and not just in this marketing position? It's not the clearest answer, but.
Are there some campaigns that you worked on that you were like really proud of? And can you walk through the audience some of the things that you were able to do as either a creative director and a creative strategist? So you're like that process, and what are some of the things you learned throughout?
Well, so I think that one of the campaigns or the overall initiatives that we did when I was at GroupM, especially because we worked with so many different parts. So GroupM is, and people are familiar with GroupM as a media agency, but they're agencies that work within that. And at the time, they were scattered all over Manhattan. We weren't in one location. And the theory was that if we brought us all together, we would be able to work more cohesively as a company overall, and not just each agency. And there was a whole initiative that followed that, which didn't come to fruition. But in any event, our job was to make sure that people were going to embrace the fact that they were going to be together, that they still had their separation. And so part of our initiative was to make sure that everybody was aware of what to expect, what was going to be happening to each agency. There was a lot of pushback. People were very reluctant. They were used to their commutes. They went from one place, and we all moved down to World Trade, which was new. It was also for obvious reasons.
Different agencies throughout the city, and they decided to all get together in one building.
Well, the agencies were let's say we're in 7th Avenue, but yes, the goal was to get everybody to be in one building so that each floor was an agency. We worked together to develop those floors, so each brand had its own identity. Again, very rewarding, a part that I'd never worked on before, where we were actually doing, it wasn't, working on a actual space, so developing the interiors to make sure each one looked like it was part of GroupM, but also remained independent.
Under the legality, its own brand, its own identity, and so on.
Everybody. So we worked with our own studios and And
now you're doing this for like an ad agency. So let alone there's a few opinions along the way that are coming.
A lot of opinions, and there's 5 CEOs, 6 CEOs, we're not dealing with, and all of them are like, well, we need this and we need that. It was, I felt like you were a ringleader in the sense that you were trying to, you wanted diplomatically to work with these people. So we figured we'll just bring them in. We'll get them as comfortable with this move as we possibly could. And it wasn't an independent, with our whole entire team, we worked with one of our own agency to write some scripts and do some videos so that we could send videos out and newsletters weekly to get people to understand we're going to FIDI. This is what you can find. We did them kind of a little bit like tongue in cheek so that people, we infused the humor so they weren't so panicky about their commutes that were changing. In any event, the goal was to get us down there and then have this tremendous block party, and partially to introduce ourselves to not only our partners, but they were also our competitors. So we had them come to this meeting to announce the fact that we had come here, and we felt like together we were one. And it was just a very...
That must have been a lot of work. I'm just imagining, like, from planning to organizing, getting all the stakeholders? What are we talking about? A year, 6 months, like timeline wise, to be able to do
It took us about a full year to get everyone moving. We did a countdown. It was, it definitely was. Listen, I was not at the time at the head of leadership where we were really getting everybody to buy in, but I worked with my CMO at the time, was getting us, everybody to buy into this whole idea and concept. The building was leased and it wasn't even finished. We were yet to complete that building. So it was also partially going down there and watching it be built. It was a tremendous amount of work from a tremendous amount of people, but it never felt like work. It felt like we were trying to get everybody to understand and recognize that this is a team effort, that this is a giant group, and it was a community. And we were joining others in our own industry in the same area so that it would become more communal. And for me, if I relate the creative aspect of it, I think that is what is something that keeps me personally going, is that ability to collaborate and to learn every day something new and something different, and where I can find aspects of somebody else's, maybe their position or their role, that I can pull into mine, so that we are always being able to open that conversation and have that continuity.
Amazing. We talk a lot about in this show about growth mindset and being open to learning and learning every day. And it's so refreshing to see that in you. It's something that I also recognized in you from the first meeting that we had. The way you learn is so inspiring. Like through conversation, you're able to ask people such great questions. And from that, you're able to gather that. And I admire that about you.
I thank you. I think that it's important also in teams and groups of teams. And I think that this is also pre-COVID, right? So we're working together, and there were days where there was a Saturday and we would be sitting in that war room trying to figure out what the next steps were. As you said, there was a lot to orchestrate and we needed to be on it all the time. The thing that worked the best for me at that particular time with the team that I really truly feel blessed to be working with, was that we came with different levels of experience from different areas and were able to start an initiative and maybe be in a room and come up with a concept. And by the time we finished and executed on that concept, we didn't really know who it was that even came up with that concept, because it was a constantly evolving and moving wheel. One day, somebody who might have been the person that we had just hired from she went from our intern to our employee, but fresh with ideas, different ways to approach things. And then there were others that had a lot more experience in certain areas and were able to tell us, things that they shared with us that just constantly kept us evolving. And to me, I always want to follow that model for teams to be successful.
That's such a valuable lesson to keep a creative process that's so dynamic that everyone has a voice that can share sort of their viewpoint and ideas without judgment, and feeling safe to be able to add. And, the culmination of the ideas, there's something that gets transformed into a great idea, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, I think also, yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes the mistake we make when we're more experienced is that we use that I'm more experienced as if that somehow gives us a leg up on we know everything that's going on. And you can have more experience and not be connected to what's, happening and what's innovative. And I think that, there are a lot of people who like to stay in certain places and status quo, but I just personally like to find out what's new and keep going forward, because there's no growth that way. And growth mindset is extremely important for me. Until I'm not here, I want to constantly be learning something new. And I'm delighted when I learn something new, not only in my own industry or in my own field, but just in general.
It's so hard for leaders sometimes too, right? Like, man, I put 20 years. I know what I'm talking about. No, stay humble. Relax. There's new ideas coming. There's new things. There's new ways of doing things. And as long as you stay that way, you're much more open to understanding those lessons that potentially could elevate you even more, right? You allow your team to be able to express their opinions. You're able to connect the dots based off of your experience and then transform that idea into something great together and all of that.
Right. I think the thing that's funny and it's off-putting, you'd say that, like, sometimes I approach every team like I'm just one of you, and I'm at the same, no matter what the level is or the years of experience. And often I think I've had two situations where I it's almost like I had FOMO. It's like, well, why are you including me? They're like, well, you already know that. I'm like, I don't know if I know that or not. And I always want, I kind of want to be in the know because I don't necessarily in certain areas. So you kind of stand out by yourself sometimes. And I understand what you're saying, but I do truly like to be with my team. I just like to keep working with my team, whether I'm running it or part of one. I kind of never even feel like I'm running them. I always feel like I'm part of them because I think that's the way it should work.
I feel like the team runs me sometimes, by the way. I'm like, they're
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's okay. Honestly, I think that's the moment where you're like, great, this is what I want. I want you to want my job. I want you to feel so safe and comfortable that you can kind of just run with things. That's what I believe. Yeah. We do this for 80% of our lives, right?
Yeah. And we're talking about teamwork here. We're talking about leadership here. And I know we've touched on it a little bit where you talked about how you brought teams together in the new building. So this is obviously the pre-COVID era. And now things have changed. And one of the ways things have changed is you and I connected, during the COVID era. And how do you see leadership or the role of a creative director or someone that, in most ways, creativity, I feel like, at least for me, happens when people connect together and are able to talk together and are able to ideate together. How has that changed, I guess, in the COVID era and post-COVID era to prior? Like, are you seeing it more efficiently now? Are you seeing it more? Is it easier or is it harder as a leader? What's your viewpoint?
I don't. It's hard to say easy versus hard, right? I think it's something in the middle. For me personally, I love to be with people I in a space because no matter how comfortable you are, you still act differently when you're physically in a room with people. There's something that happens in the spaces, which is where the magic happens. It's not necessarily when the talking is happening. It's sometimes when the silence is happening or when you're doing something silly because you've just been in that room for 5 hours. That it's different when you're on a phone call for 5 hours. You get burnt really quickly, and not that you don't in a room, but it's a different energy. And I think that's what I find is the biggest challenge is there is an energy that's lacking. And I am grateful for, first of all, great people that I've always worked with. Like I said, I met you this way. I've met some amazing people. And we've adapted, we've adapted by using things like mirror boards and certain things that have allowed us to collaborate. But it's certainly not the same as standing up in front of a whiteboard, and just kind of going crazy. It's a little different, but manageable. I think for me, perfection would be a hybrid type of situation. I was very adamant about, creative teams need to be together because we're creative. And I think, well, we're all humans and we kind of probably do need to get together. It doesn't really necessarily lend itself to only being with creative people. I think anything, I don't know, I think the dynamic of just the way humans work together is important to be physically there. But you could talk to somebody in my daughter's generation and, they are like, no, we're great staying home working. I met some of my greatest friends that I'm friends with now from my very first job. So we're talking 20 years. And that was because that's what we did. We were just working and then we would go out and then you become really good friends with these people. And I think there's that aspect that maybe they're missing, but they might be gaining other things that I'm not aware of because I don't know how to expose myself the way they do, right? There's areas there that I think, the generation that kind of grew up with this different type of working is, they adapt and this is the way they work and that's what they're used to.
Right. In general, what do you see some of the challenges like facing creative strategy development now? And is it the same challenges that you saw in the past? Or how would you describe if you had a whiteboard and you wanted to describe like the best creative strategy, how would you go about articulating that? Like it has to have these elements. This is what makes it really, really good. This is what makes it unique and so on.
The thing that makes it unique and really, really good is the input you have from other people. This is not something you develop yourself. I personally, not for me. I am a great ideator. I come up with some great ideas and I like to think a little differently. And sometimes I can be in a room filled with noise and people are saying the same things. And my ability is to maybe see it from a different angle And that's how I approach my strategies, is just to not look at what's always obvious, because that's the differentiator, right? If everyone's selling the same thing, you need to be able to discuss and see how you can differentiate yourself. And that's the strategic component, and not always easy when you're selling the same thing. So how does that personality develop? What do we sound like? What do we look like? And I think that those foundational aspects of building a brand and that strategy that goes around it sometimes they're critical. And when when we look at that and think, well, we have to cut this because we have less time to do it, I think that is inherently a big, in my opinion, it's a mistake. I don't think those are things that you can avoid.
How are you able to see, I guess, the uniqueness or see the other side of it? Like, it's something that you practice all the time, or like, how are you able to develop that side of your talent?
I can't really actually answer that 100%. I can tell you, like, even as simple as, this is visual because I'm a visual thinker. When we were doing the logo for disco, or we're looking at disco, right? And that the story of that logo was just kind of funny, right? They found it and they wanted the name, it worked. And then when we were building on that, it was like, how can we make the word disco work with what we're selling? And you don't necessarily have to. And so I was listening to every aspect of that because it was very important. But I think for me, I was thinking, what makes that visual different, right? And then we started to talk about the record and the needle. And I know that this is simplistic and for what you're asking, I think, but it's, I guess, the ability to see the negative space, not necessarily always looking at what's right in front of you, but be able to see, okay, well, if we erased all that, what's inside? So it's somewhat how I develop a strategy anyway. It's like, okay, we're saying all of these things. What are we saying on the other side of that maybe we can extract? And I can't say there's a specific formula. It's just a matter of listening and seeing it differently. It's just the way I approach it. I had an old boss that used to say to me, Robin, everybody needs a plan. And he said, I understand that your plan is not to have a plan. So, that's not the best answer, but that is really what it boils down to, is that I can't tell you, because each time the strategy is different. It's like, it's like each individual is different.
Or is it like some people, will just sit there and write down like all these different ideas, and then they're like, oh, this one seems good, and then they build off of that? Or is it more or is it more like it's in your head and it's festering, and all of a sudden you're like, this is it?
It's kind of in my head, and I usually have more than one, and I'll write 3 of them down, and then I start to kind of build off of it. Like, if you think of a tree and it's, okay, then you're just going to start adding. I like to always say you have a blank canvas, and the first thing you do is big brush strokes, and you just want to see what it is that's appealing to you. It's very basic. And then you say, okay, this is appealing to me. Why? Because something hits you initially, and you then build upon that, and you keep building on that. And that's part of what I love about a brand, because you continue to do that till forever, right? It's always evolving. There's always
growing and evolving.
Right. So it's that seed of an idea that takes you in one direction for maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 5 months, can continue to grow in a different way, but it almost fuels it by itself. So that, I don't sit and go, okay, there's the 5-year plan and the strategy. Loosely, yes, of course, but not in a very detailed way initially. It's more kind of what I absorb and then what I'm able to apply, and then how we go about executing on that. It's like, I think about one of the first things that I learned, because I wasn't working on this end of things before I came to disco, was how we were sending out those ads, right? I think you and I worked on that. Let's do 5 versions and see what appeals to people. And I would be fascinated that 9 times out of 10, which is probably not a good career move, the one that I would have chosen and I would have thought would have been successful based on my experience was not, right? So then it was, to me, fascinating to find out what it is that people are connecting to, and how, and that became a whole different component to how the strategy had to change, because I was all of a sudden questioning what I knew so well. Like, I know this is how typically, not only from my training, but my own experience, how people ingest and what seems to make them engage. And then, wow, it's not necessarily that all the time.
Data
So that was
equalizer, right? Like all of a sudden you're
right.
looking at it, you're like, whoa, okay, maybe that didn't resonate.
Right. And if you think about like from like even from a design perspective, we're looking at things like it's like deductive for us. So it's not a natural combination. Um, and I find that I was, and I still am, um, amazed and delighted because it's one of those things that you get to learn, but I'm also terrified at the same time. Initially I was AI every day, like, what can I do? Same type of thing. This is so exciting. Where's it going? And then, wait, where is it going? Am I not going to have a job? Which I don't worry about now. Um, Only because I think, Hamlet, what I always realize is behind every product, behind everything we do, we can collect all the data and analytics we want, and we do, and we work from them, but there's still a human being there. So until the human being
Yeah.
stop being a part of this process, there's still a component that I feel as a brand, if you're ignoring that in any way, that's a problem. So, and we were just having that discussion a little bit this morning about, qualitative versus quantitative, and how, as a creative, it's more for me qualitative, right, than it is quantitative.
Right. What are some brands that you look at and you admire, or what are some places that you go for your inspiration for the way you like kind of think through things?
It depends. When I go through visual inspiration, I don't know, I go to Pinterest. I just look up some things. But brands that I followed are, I love Coca-Cola. I love the way they work. Chobani is another brand that I I think the thing that sticks to me the most is if a company is at least doing something for the greater good and connects to what they're doing. So Chobani is a very good example of that, because they're all about sustainability, and their visuals are important for them to be, work on their sustainability aspect. They give back. So they blend their, obviously, consumers, but they're consumers, but they're blending that with their beliefs and giving back as much as they can. I'm inspired by everything. It's the oddest of things that will inspire me. So sometimes, honestly, I just need to go outside to be inspired, or just to listen to a playground. I know that, that sounds like, how is that inspirational, and why? That's not necessarily taking me where I'm going through every brand and I'm noticing, but I notice details quickly. And something just sticks to me, then I'll do some research into why it connected to me. And then I'm just fascinated with the psychology of it.
Got it. So is it more the human element of it, of like, how does it make you feel? How does it make you connect with the brand? Is that what you're looking for? And when you feel that,
I think that's what it is for all of them, regardless. I think that some of us are aware. It's my job to be aware. So I'm keenly aware of what it is that I'm sensitive to. I think that sometimes it just rolls over the rest of me, and not in a bad way. It's supposed to. You're supposed to almost kind of like, don't know why, but you're drawn to this, but you're drawn to it. My job is to know the why. So I kind of build off of that. But if you think about your day to day, what you're drawn to and what you're not drawn, it's visual. We're all visual. We, from what we're seeing. I mean, that's just the way I find I'm inspired.
amazing. And then I know we touched on this, is so AI and all these other tools and all these technologies that are starting to come out. Tools like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, that makes design a little bit more easier. Even in Photoshop, you can kind of highlight different areas and put a prompt in, and it'll kind of help the designers quickly be able to iterate. I know you mentioned the human element of this, but what do you think it now allows designers to be able to do that they weren't able to do before? Or are they able to push new boundaries that they never were able to explore? Or where do you see how does this technology really enable the artists behind all of the creation of the visual elements? Where could it elevate them?
I think a few things. I think it's that you have to be willing to go in and break things. You have to be willing to go in and try them. I think that, you have it, when ChatGPT first came out, I thought, I'm going to try this first. And I realized the more I gave it, the more I was getting back, right? It's really the same thing with the creative approach. When I first went into DALL-E, I felt that it was then, it's certainly evolved, that it was very crude. It wasn't really doing what I asked it to do. I had less patience with that, ironically, than I did with ChatGPT to experiment because it took a little longer. I remember when I was at GroupM, we were working on an initiative that unfortunately didn't come to fruition, but it was fascinating, called All for One, which was going to take the marketer from a marketer to a consumer so they could see the journey of what we were going through and certain aspects of how we collected data. And at the time, Adobe had Sensei, which they still kind of have. I'm not really sure if Sensei went by the wayside and now it became Firefly, but it was kind of the first of those AIs that was going to take your image and you were going to plug in a few things and then it was going to change it. And this was your assistant. So it was going to start to go, okay, Robin likes to do things that are, colorful, bold, uses this bright palette, so that when I use it, it would start to learn about me and it would become my assistant, right? That's the goal. I think that's the one aspect of it that I like, because I don't have an assistant. So I use it as a way of, I have this vision in my head. I'm not quite sure how I can execute it. If I can plug it in, I might not get exactly what I was looking for, but I am getting a version of it that gets me to the next point. So that's how I would use it. I think it's constantly evolving. What it will and won't be capable of doing, is, again, I don't think it's ever taking our jobs. We laugh as creatives because we always say, in order for us to finish something, somebody has to tell us, like, I like blue and I want it to be pretty, right? That's not a directive, but that's what we're used to. And somehow from I like blue and I want it to be pretty, we come up with a logo and a brand identity, right?
I'm laughing with you because I've done that so many times. I feel so bad for it. I'm like, I don't know what I like, but I don't like that.
Yeah, I can tell you what I don't like. I always tell people, give me a mood board. And they're like, well, aren't you supposed to give me a mood board? I said, absolutely. I said, I can, and I do. I often digest your information. I'm going to give the mood board back, but it helps me to understand, especially when this is an individual, what it is that you're seeing. Like if this is we're building a persona or we're going to build this brand. Who's this brand? What are the words that we use? We did this exercise a little bit with when we were working on Survey Junkie. So it's kind of the way I approach all of it. And I'm used to that. We're used to that. It's, it's frustrating. It's also funny. And it's a challenge, right? How can I develop something from 2 words? I'm going to give it a shot. So I think in that capacity, it's going to obviously keep helping. And I'm not, I personally am going to admit that I don't think I'm using it enough just to be able to understand where it's going. So I gave myself that task last week to try to really start developing my own sense of where I think this is going. Only because I also want to be able to help teams as I build them and learn from them as well, and then be able to say, let's try this. Let's see what we can do with this. So,
perfect. What advice would you give businesses that today are trying to build like a successful brand strategy? What, more like startups, if they're early on and they're super, super early and they really haven't defined their voice yet, or they're not sure exactly what their brand should be. What are some things that you're just like, these are sort of table stakes. You should be thinking about these. These are some things you should be thinking about.
Well, I think the first thing that you need to think about, which is so not the mentality, is take the time. Take that time initially, because it doesn't have to be completely baked. It has to be baked enough ingredients that you can get something that you can set out there to digest, right? Like that's what I think about it. Like you're not gonna just put flour in a pot. You're gonna kind of try to let's get some flour, sugar, and water. So we have some ingredients that maybe if we put it together, we have dough now. And to continue that type of thinking, that it's important to really take the time for those foundations and to say your mission and vision are at least set for that initial time. It should change. Like evolution is important to a brand, but I think we go from these abrupt, like, let's just get this out there and then we'll worry about what that means later. I think it's important to take the time to do that. And I think that's what I can only say from startups is I think that's partially what happens. And I understand it. They don't have the luxury of time, but there's still a way to approach it where, respectfully, let's take a minute and really figure out what we want this to do. Like, what's the end goal? Like, what is that end goal? And it doesn't have to be a long-term plan, but let's just get it. Let's say it's a 3-month plan. I think sometimes the bite is too big or it's not enough, and we are not spending enough time really developing that. Because ultimately, that also has to help the founders, right? It has to help the business overall to understand what we are. You talk about past, present, and future. We need to know where we came from to build on something so that we can go into the future. And I think there are a lot of times we ignore where we came from. And those sometimes are just the ideas. Why did you want to do this business? What's important to you to achieve for this business? Other than we want to make money and we want to do that. We know that. But think of it.
So hard. As startups and founders, they're in a race of time, and
absolutely
they have to find the next way of growth or the next revenue mechanism or product market fit or what it might be. But I do agree. I think it's important throughout the course of that, realizing that overall they are creating a brand, and that brand that they're building is allowing their customers to resonate with them and to acquire new customers and to retain their customers at the same time. And rushing through that process might actually hurt them versus helping them in the long
run. Right. I think that's take the time to recognize what your differentiator is, because everybody has one. If you're, no matter what it is, take the time to do that, because you've taken the time to build that product, right? If you're living in that space, that you've taken the time to do that, and it takes time. Right. So treat the part that people are going to be buying into with as much seriousness. It's as important. One doesn't work without the other.
Right. And with so much competition now, it's so easy to have another Me Too product versus really, why are you unique? How are you different? How do you connect and resonate with the customers? More importantly, how do they connect with you and remember you? 100%.
Right. I think also when we were working on Disco, right, it was let's not look like tech. And okay, but then have a reason why you're not looking like tech, right? And I'm not, again, putting it was the right mentality. It still is. How do we make ourselves stand out? Because we stand out. We do have a unique product. So we want to seem unique, and all of it works. But then you have to remember there's certain things in your industry that people are just used to seeing, and it's a very fine line. But what I do credit them with is, let's give it a shot. Let's see how it works. And if it doesn't, we can pull it back and evolve it. It's a difference between complete changes and evolutions. And I think also that's something to consider, especially in the startup space. We know we're going to evolve. We know this is going to change. In fact, we look forward to that. But if we start with the right foundation, it won't seem like, wait, wasn't that last week? That it becomes a completely different, where your users, the people that are just starting to get to know you might not recognize, and then that starts to question your brand value.
Right.
And that's something I think also needs to be taken into consideration.
Well, Robin, thank you for taking the time and spending the last hour or so with us. Honestly, you lived up to what I thought it was going to be. I learned a bunch of interesting things once again. I really appreciate it. If anyone in the listening audience wants to get a hold of you in the show notes, should we put your LinkedIn, or what's the best way of them to be able to contact you?
Yeah, that's great. LinkedIn is perfect.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Welcome. This brings us to the end of our enlightening conversation with Robin. We've explored the past, present, and future of creative strategy and marketing, and I hope you found our discussion insightful as I did. Remember, the world of business and innovation, learning never stops, so keep exploring, keep growing, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Thank you, Robin, for sharing your journey and insights with us today, and thank you to all our listeners for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review, and don't forget to subscribe for more insightful conversation with industry leaders. This has been the Growth Ventures podcast. I'm your host, Hamlet Azarian. Until next time, stay innovative, stay informed.